Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 22 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half. You can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've seen him on the Tough Cover Pod, although not on last week's review show. It's Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at @MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how you doing today?
Well, I'm sick, so if you could put up with my voice, everyone, it'll be just a little bit more annoying than usual. But I'm excited to talk some Eagles. Like Shane said, I didn't get to do the review, so I got plenty of takes from last week, plenty of takes going into this week, so I'm excited to talk about the NFL.
All right, so it's your turn to be sick. A couple weeks ago, I was sick on the podcast. I will say your voice sounds much, much better than mine did in the same circumstances. So. And we've got a great show lined up for you guys today. We're going to preview every single Week 9 game with a special emphasis, as always, on the Eagles. But before we get to that, this is going out live on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter. Drop us comments. We love to throw those up on the screen and interact with you guys on the show. If you're not watching live, that's totally fine. The archives are also up there or on Apple Podcasts. So please follow, rate, review. We really appreciate that. So, Mark, let's dive into it here. The Eagles coming off a big win over the Lions. Big as in the spread, not that they're some great team, but now they face the Los Angeles Chargers. Where do you want to dive into this one?
I guess we could start with the defense. I think that's probably like the biggest concern. Obviously, I know that last week looked a lot better than it has in the last couple weeks in the whole year besides the Atlanta game. But I think this is obviously a little bit of a different task and a little bit of a different offense than going up against Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions offense that you can't name any receivers. You got plenty of things to worry about when it comes to the Chargers. Obviously, Justin Herbert, one of the fastest rising stars in the league. Austin Eckler, one of the most, dual threat running backs in the league. Mike Williams, a big play option, someone who can get 3 touchdowns in a game, someone who could get 2 catches for 20 yards in a game. He's a real boomer bust guy, Mike Williams. And then Keenan Allen, who's just, chugging along his way to maybe being a Hall of Famer. I've never thought about his Hall of Fame candidacy before, but his numbers have got to be crazy consistent over the last however long he's been in the league. And then Jared Cook's been making plays too at tight end. And with our linebackers, I'm always going to be nervous about tight ends going into games, even though we've done pretty good job on a lot of them besides Dalton Schultz, as we've talked about a lot on this pod. But I would say the number one thing I'm concerned about, I think it has to be, I just mentioned the linebackers, and I'll kind of twist that in another way. It has to be Eckler. I think Austin Eckler is going to tear us apart. And that's kind of my number one concern going into this game. And basically not on the ground. I think that he could get like 100+ yards receiving. I don't know how he's been game to game this year, but I think this is a game where he absolutely tears us up and tears our linebackers up. I don't know who we're going to be asking to guard Austin Eckler on a consistent basis, and I just don't think we have anyone that can do it.
Yeah, he's been a threat on the ground. He's been a threat through the air this year, and frankly, the Eagles just don't have a linebacker that can cover him. I'm not sure they have a safety that could cover him, and so that could be a big exploitable matchup for the Chargers. Now, you look at the Chargers offense, they've really struggled over the last 3 weeks. Now, their bye week is in there, but they had a bad showing against the Ravens, hit the bye, have a bad showing against the Patriots coming out of their bye week. So I went back and looked at some of those games, figure out, what's going on here with the Chargers. And the Patriots played a ton of zone against the Chargers, which you might think is good news for the Eagles, but they play zone totally differently. The Ravens played a bunch of man, and both teams really shut them down. And so what's the common thread? Well, I think the common thread is that both of those defenses showed some multiple looks up front, and they confused Justin Herbert, showing a lot of pressure packages. And then they may bail into coverage or they may not. There might be 4 guys coming. There might be 7. And Justin Herbert is good under pressure. He's not necessarily as good when he's blitzed. And we've talked before about the Chargers, how they like to condense their sets. It makes it easier to disguise where that pressure is going to come from. The problem is you look at the Eagles, and they're not a team that sends pressure. They're not a team that has the linebacker personnel to do that with. It's just not how they deploy themselves. And so the Patriots played zone to try to confuse Herbert. The Eagles play zone out of necessity because they can't cover people. So you look at the Chargers. It's a team that wants to nickel and dime their way down the field. Their average depth of target is very low on first and second down. The Eagles can't just sit back in their soft drop zone. In my opinion, because you don't really have the option to bring a lot of linebacker pressure, I think you're going to have to play more man coverage and try to get the ball out of Herbert's hand quickly, but not just give up these little 3-4 yard completions. Derek Carr showed you what happens when a quarterback will take that. And Justin Herbert's going to take that. It's what they want to do to begin with. And so the Eagles are going to have to be more aggressive than they are used to in this matchup.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And touching on something you mentioned there with the the Chargers struggling the last 2 weeks against the Ravens and the Patriots, that's not the first time that the Chargers have went through a little bit of offensive struggles this year. I actually, after week 2, I remember I went on a radio show and I was like, I'm really concerned about the Chargers because they put up 20 points against the Washington football team defense, which at the time we thought was really good. Now it doesn't look quite as impressive to put up 20 points against that defense when everyone's put up 30 plus. And they also scored 17 against Dallas, which is kind of done the opposite. At the time, we thought the Dallas defense was bad. They're obviously a lot better than we thought they were. So that was the first 2 weeks of this year. They scored 20 and 17 points, and those were both close, ugly games that it felt like they had plenty of chances to win those games and to put up more points, and they had some trouble in the red zone. And then after that, they go out and they beat Kansas City. They go out and they torch the Raiders. They go out and they put 47 on Cleveland. And then we see these last 2 games. So it's really been like a tale of 3 seasons almost for the Chargers. You had those first 2 struggling games. Then you had those 4 games in the middle where they looked like one of the best teams in the league, or maybe 3 games in the middle. And then these last 2 games. So they're kind of like a Jekyll and Hyde situation at this point. There's a couple teams in this league that you don't know what you're getting on a week-to-week basis. I mean, you could throw the Eagles into that discussion in terms of the Jekyll and Hyde thing. I mean, we've talked at length about the Saints. You don't know what team the Saints are going to be week to week. I kind of think we might be getting there with the Chargers right now. And that game last week was almost more concerning than the Ravens game, because the Ravens game, it made a lot of sense matchup wise that would be a struggle for the Chargers. And we'll touch on it when we get to the offensive side, but they are not good at stopping the run. They want you to run the football. That's Brandon Staley's MO. It comes from the Vic Fangio coaching tree. He basically runs the same defense that Fangio runs. So that's what he wants you to do. He wants you to run the ball. Now, Baltimore takes that to another degree. I don't know if you can enact that same strategy against Baltimore. They tried and they got burnt and they got killed and they went up early. And when you're Baltimore and you get up early against a team that can't stop the run, that obviously presents a terrible game script for the Chargers. Obviously, their offense was pretty underwhelming in that game. But I would say that Patriots game was even more concerning. To put up 17 points against the Patriots, to have the struggles they did in the red zone, to have the one miscommunication interception that really ended up being a really big part of the game. I think it was a pick 6, unless I'm misremembering. So I think that it'll be interesting to see what version of the Chargers we get here, because I mean, Vegas doesn't know clearly, and we'll get to that. Vegas doesn't know what version they're getting of the Eagles or the Chargers, with this being a 1.5 point spread in favor of the Chargers.
Yeah, the thing with the Chargers is they've been so poor on first and second downs. They've been so poor in the red zone. They've made their living in the games they've won converting third downs, and that's not a place that you want to be. And so when they can do that, they're really good, and when they can't, they really struggle. It reminds me of last year. You had the article that came out, I think it was USA Today, that went back and looked at all the analytics from Carson Wentz in 2017 and talked about how Wentz's EPA per play was not different really on first and second down than it was this year. He was just so clutch on third and fourth downs. And they argued that he wasn't ever that great of a player. He was just incredibly clutch in 2017. And that regression was always going to come. Well, it's kind of like that with the Chargers. They were so good on third downs, but they consistently put themselves in those situations. And eventually that's going to come due. You're going to regress back to the mean there. And if that happens, it's a team that really struggles to move the ball. You pile on top of that their offensive line, Rashawn Slater has played really well. They brought in 2 free agents, but this is an offensive line that has not gelled yet. The only guy they returned from last year is the right tackle, Storm Norton, and he allowed 10 pressures last week against New England. And so this is a team that if you can take away the short stuff, if you can buy your pass rush a little time, it can get home. And if you can put them behind the sticks, it's an offense that can really struggle. And I think we've seen that over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see if Gannon's able to dial it up in the same way that he did last week. Again, it's hard to know what to take away from last week and how much of it to take away and do you take it with a grain of salt, or is that kind of going to be the game that we look at in this season where it's like, oh, they kind of turned it around, whether that be just the defense or whether that be the team overall. But it's going to be interesting. I would guess that this is a more of a Keenan Allen game than a Mike Williams game for the Chargers. I would guess. I think there's been 2 or 3 straight games under like 6 fantasy points for Mike Williams. So I would kind of expect that to continue. It seems like they're kind of using him a little bit less than they were at the beginning of the year, especially in the red zone. So like I said, Austin Eckler terrifies me as an underneath option. Keenan Allen has shown in the past that he's a high receptions guy. He's someone that can absolutely kill us with death by a million paper cuts, which is kind of what we are asking teams to do with dropping our safeties back into the end zone and all that nonsense. So I'll be really curious to see if they are, if they just run that same thing, like you said, against the Raiders and against Derek Carr, because we've seen when you have a competent quarterback like Derek Carr, like Justin Herbert, they will be able to just pick that apart. They're not going to be, you're banking on a couple mistakes. They're not going to make mistakes if you're playing that far off.
Right. And so you touched on it a few moments ago. You flip over to the other side and you have the Chargers run defense, which is last in nearly every measurable category in the NFL right now. And so you have Brandon Staley. He comes from not St. Louis. I about said St. Louis. He comes from the Rams. Old habits die hard. He plays the split field look that the Eagles play themselves, a light box. It's this idea of rally and tackle, give them the underneath. And that works great when Aaron Donald is in the middle of the field and you've got Jalen Ramsey on a boundary. It doesn't work as well when you're missing those guys. And so they have been just gashed by the running game. Now, granted, they've played some good running teams like the Ravens. And so you look at the Eagles. Eagles fans have screamed, run the ball for weeks. Finally, they ran the ball against the Lions. The Eagles' identity is not going to be running the ball 35 times a game. But it's likely to happen again this week. I mean, if you're looking at this, you're coming in with a game plan. That's how you want to attack this defense. Make them adjust out of what they want to do. And the Eagles are good at running the ball. They've got a good run-blocking offensive line. You can sort of negate Joey Bosa, which is somebody else we need to touch on in a moment. You can negate him a little bit, his impact, if you're running at the interior of that defensive line. And so I think that's what you're going to see from the Eagles offense this week. Do you agree?
Yeah, for sure. There's someone I really want to touch on with the Eagles, and this is kind of like this is this game point, and this is just a going forward point. You can turn it into a fantasy point if you'd like to, actually, too. But it's more about just how important one player is to the Eagles, and it's Dallas Goddard. Dallas Goddard, if you look at the stats last week, I've been floored by this. I can't stop bringing it up wherever I'm talking about the Eagles. We had Jalen Hurts do the ball 14 times. Dallas Goddard had 6 catches on 7 targets for 72 yards. That means half of the potential targets in that game went to Dallas Goddard. And I know maybe you can pull this up while I'm talking, Shane. That tweet that you had with the percentages about where Hurts is throwing the football, about left, middle, right? If you can,
I'll find it.
Yeah. Because I think that that's an important thing that I think that everyone's been able to pick apart and notice just by layman's terms, by watching the game and seeing how often that Hurts likes to roll right and seeing his aversion to throwing to the middle of the field. And obviously the argument all year and with everything Hurts related has been, is that Sirianni based? Is that Hurts based? Is that Sirianni being nervous that Hurts can't throw to the middle of the field? Or is that Hurts being nervous that he can't throw to the middle of the field? And that's an important discussion. But last week, it does seem like they kind of tried to remedy that. And I know it's the Lions. They didn't throw much, but they were getting the ball to Dallas Goddard sometimes across the middle of the field. And I'm hoping that that's something they're looking at going forward, because you look at the 2 games since Ertz has been out, since Ertz has been traded, and Goddard had 3 catches on 5 targets for 70 yards and 6 catches on 7 targets for 72 yards, like I just said. So I think he's going to be a top 5, top 6 fantasy tight end rest of the way. And I think he's going to be the focal point of our passing offense, even maybe more than Devonta Smith, who has obviously seen his targets decrease. But you see the stats right there. Maybe Shane can take you through them.
Yeah, so this is Jalen Hurts' target share by zone of the field. So he is targeting the left side of the field on 35% of his throws, the middle on 10%, and the right on 55%. And then if you break it down, and if you're watching, you can see this. If not, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, go search out my Twitter feed at @half_TPL. You can find this. I'll make it my pinned tweet. But 71% of his passing attempts are under 15 yards, 29% is over 15 yards. And then if you tab over using those same zones, the completion percentage by field zone, he's completing 5 or 6% more when he throws over to the right than when he throws to the left. And so, I talked about in the tweet that he has a strong preference for throwing right in both metrics, in both his target share and his completion percentage. And I also said I'm more concerned about his aversion to throwing over the middle than I am his preference to throw to the right. Only 10% of his passes have been over the middle of the field through, 8 weeks now. So, yeah, Dallas Goddard is going to be a big deal. They like to run out-breaking stuff to Goddard on the right side of the field. They like to give Hurts the option to roll out, or to be honest, Hurts likes to bail from a clean pocket and roll out to the right, and they like to have Goddard over there near the sideline.
Yeah, I think, and in the same way that we kind of play that too high look and we give a lot of cushion for receivers, I think that kind of goes for quarterbacks running the ball as well. So I'd be interested to see, I haven't really looked into this, but how the Chargers have done against running quarterbacks, or if they've really even played. I guess they played Lamar and they struggled against Lamar. He's obviously a little bit different than Jalen Hurts. I'd like to look into maybe someone a bit different than Lamar. I'd be curious to see how they've been against rushing quarterbacks. I'm sure that scheme does not bode well for giving up pretty easy first downs and easy third down conversions. So I'd be looking for Jalen Hurts to use his legs a lot, but I've said this time in and time again. I don't believe in the whole let's call designed runs for Jalen Hurts. I don't think he's Lamar in the way that let's run options, let's run constant RPOs, let's run constant run options. I would rather just see him scramble. And I know that he does like to bail from a clean pocket at times, and that can be definitely frustrating. But I'd rather see that than these designed runs that just don't seem to ever be all that successful. The designed runs don't ever seem to get 4 or 5 yards. They seem to be 2-3 yard plays that the defense is absolutely ready for.
With the exception, I would love to see them use him out of shotgun in a power running game down in the red zone. He thrived on that at Oklahoma. That's totally different, though. But yeah, I mean, he's not a guy you're going to call a lot of designs for. I do like that they run a few read options because the defense never seems to expect him to keep it when he does. But we've got Julio chiming in on Facebook, says Tyree Jackson should be up this or next weekend. I haven't heard anything about him this weekend, but yeah, we should be hitting that window. It was supposed to be 8 to 10 weeks. This would be week 9. And so he should be somebody that we could look at coming back before. Now, what impact he'll make when he does, I don't know, but he should be potentially in line for some playing time, especially now with Ertz gone. The other guy I want to touch on is Joey Bosa. Joey Bosa could be a problem for Jordan Mailata. Mailata, again, has been tossed back and forth to left to right side a few times this year. Bosa is really the only thing the Chargers pass rush has, but he's playing at a high level. And so I think you're going to see the Eagles slide protection his way a lot, maybe, chip with him. Although the problem there is, again, we already talked about the Eagles like to put Goddard on that right side. And if Bosa's rushing off the left side, you can't really chip off of him unless you go too tight end. Or I guess you could get a receiver, snubbed up to the line there. But something to keep an eye on, and something, again, I think you can mitigate by running at the right side, especially shotgun runs going away from Bosa, because, again, you get into that read option deal. Even if it's not a read option, he has to respect it, and you're sort of scheming him out of a play. You can leave him unblocked and go block the next level and just take him out of the play. And so I do think you could see more shotgun runs this week where we saw such a heavy dose under center just to try to neutralize Bosa without even having to block him.
No, that definitely makes some sense. I'm usually against the design runs just because I don't think he's athletic enough to make it really worthwhile. But I would say that, yeah, anything to avoid Joey Bosa wrecking this game is definitely a good thing. I would say, are you concerned about Derwyn James going into this game?
I mean, you have to be. Derwyn James is a guy that locked up Travis Kelce, and we just got done talking about how important Dallas Goddard is to this offense. Now, I'm not sure that Dallas Goddard commands Derwyn James just manning him up all game. But I do think if you get into a situation where you see that that's the only thing that they're really looking at, I think it's an adjustment we could see. I don't know that that's going to be their game plan coming in, but I do think we'll see Derwyn shadowing Goddard a decent amount. I think he's even good enough to drop into the slot too. On not that he'd need to do it against Jalen Reagor, but if they put Devonta Smith in the slot, I think you could see some of that as well. So, well, it'll be interesting to see how they adjust to that. The line on this game is really interesting. So you said earlier it was the Chargers favored by 1.5. When I looked earlier in the week, the Chargers were only favored by 1, and I actually dropped quite a bit on that. That's one of my bigger bets of the year. The Chargers offense has not been playing the best, but the Eagles offense hasn't been playing the best either. I know they just railroaded a Lions team that is quite bad. They did it largely on the ground. They should be able to have success on the ground, but at the end of the day, I don't trust this defense. Even if the offense comes out dedicated to the run, I'm not sure that the defense is going to be able to stop the Chargers. And so in what is essentially a pick 'em, a 1-point spread, I dumped a good amount of money on that. As long as the Chargers win, I win. I mean, if they win by 1, it'd be a push. I get my money back. But 1.5, maybe you're a little more cautious there. But at 1 point, I just viewed that as a pick 'em, and I took a pretty big bet on that one.
I just had to run out for 1 minute, but I can't speak too much to this because I can't bet on the Chargers. I can't bet against the Eagles, just my own personal problems there. I can't bet against the Sixers. I can't bet against the Eagles, but I can admit when a line is telling you to bet against the Eagles. But this is one of those situations where Vegas has to know something, right? This should be a 3.5, 4-point spread. This is bizarre. This is one of the weirdest lines I've seen in the NFL this year, and there's been a ton of weird lines, even weirder in college football at times. But this line, I can't believe this is under a field goal. This absolutely should be around maybe even 4, 4.5. So there's definitely some value with the Chargers. I think the Chargers probably win this game. I'll say 24-21. I'm saying it's a little less high scoring than we think. I'm not sure where the total is. Might be around 50. But so I guess I would kind of like the under there. The Chargers do seem to play some of these games that they kind of muck it up and keep it closer than you think it's going to be. There's been most of their games have been decided by one score. So I think this is going to be a closer game than people expect. Maybe I know a lot of the gambling community just can't believe that the Chargers are only a 1.5 point favorite, so they're going to hammer them. But it could be one of those situations where Vegas is telling you something.
After last week, when I dropped a large amount on the chart or on the Cowboys early in the week because I thought that line wasn't big enough, and then Dak didn't play, and I went through that whole roller coaster of emotion, and then I won the bet anyways with Cooper Rush. I'm just feeling lucky this week, so let's see what happens. But yeah, I've got the Chargers winning this one as well. I think it could be a good game. Ultimately, I'm not going to pick against the Chargers in this scenario, though.
No, the Chargers are the pick for sure. If you're betting on this game, I would go with the Chargers.
Julio says, no way weather will play along with it. If we put pressure, it'll affect Herbert's hand. Philly gets their first home win of the season. Well, this is an away game, right? Or did I write that down wrong?
No, it's a home game.
No, it's a home game. It's a home game. You're right. Yeah. I just looked at it wrong. I usually put whoever at whoever, and I put verse. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I still trust Herbert more than I trust Jalen Hurts. Ultimately, I trust their offense more than our offense. I trust their defense more than our defense, and I trust their coaching more than our coaching. So if you just want to look at it simply, where's the advantage in each of these, I would give the Chargers the advantage in all three.
I agree with you. There's definitely some trends out there about West Coast teams traveling to East Coast, but if you dive into them, it's usually like you can usually kind of pick it apart by the good teams kind of stay right around that winning percentage that they'd usually be at. And it's usually influenced by bad teams, whether that be on the East Coast going West or West Coast going to East. I saw someone, someone tweeted out that the Jags are like 3-14 in their last 17 games going to the West Coast. And it's like, yeah, they're like 4-28 in their last, however many games.
I don't think the travel has anything to do with it.
Yeah. So I think that most of the time it's a little overblown, but there are probably some times where it has a little bit of an effect. But I would say that the Chargers should win this game.
Yeah, and hopefully the link will be rocking. 4:00 game at home, coming off of a big win. So hopefully, home field advantage factors into it a little bit. But I guess we will see on Sunday. All right, let's throw it around the NFL now, preview the rest of these games. Up first, we have the Cleveland Browns traveling to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. The Bengals, who we said might be the best team in their division, and then they promptly lost to the Jets. Meanwhile, the Browns have lost 3 out of their last 4 games. So what do you make of this one?
I still think the Browns are the better team here. If you just go roster by roster, I think the Browns are the better team. So I think you're getting a little bit of an advantage with +3 here. So I'm on Browns +3 at the Bengals. I think they win the game outright too. I think this could be one of those situations where the team galvanizes against Odell. I can't remember her name. Aditi something. She works for NFL Network, and she had that bombshell video yesterday or 2 days ago where she was at the Browns facility, and there had kind of been a narrative out there that there were people that were Team Odell and Team Baker. And she kind of said, like, no, like everyone anonymously is kind of thinks what Odell is doing is BS. Like everyone is on Baker's side here. Everyone thinks Baker's the right leader. Whether or not I agree with that, whether or not I think Baker is an excellent quarterback, this is one of those situations where it's like, I think Odell's kind of washed up, but I also kind of think he's right that Baker's not very good and doesn't get him the ball. So it's one of those situations where I think everyone's wrong. But I do think that there's a good chance that the Browns kind of galvanize around this. And I think that there's a good chance that this defense that has kind of struggled the last couple of weeks, and we were praising them earlier on in the year, that Chargers game really seems to have broken them a little bit. They've had some injuries as well, but I think the defense gets back on track here and gets them a win.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Baker is a good leader. It's just, is he a good quarterback? And that's an argument you can have. What the argument we can't have is he a good quarterback right now playing while he's injured? And the answer is absolutely not. OBJ's gone now. Hopefully that drama's gone for them, but it's still just such a beat up team. I'm going to take the Bengals in this one. I think the Bengals, I think they came in with a bad game plan against a backup quarterback and didn't adjust. I don't think it negates what they did the week before. And so until they go lose this game, I'm still with the Bengals. I still think that they are probably in the driver's seat of that division, but obviously if they lose this one as well, that all goes away. But I'll take Cincinnati. I do think it'll be a good game, a close game. But I would rather have Joe Burrow as my QB in this game than Baker Mayfield.
You wouldn't say Baltimore's in the front seat there?
Man, yeah, I don't. This division is so weird. You know, we thought early in the year Baltimore absolutely was in the driver's seat. Then Pittsburgh wins week 1 over the Bills. And like, well, maybe I don't know. Ultimately, I think Baltimore gets there if they can. There's just so much injury. You know, Cleveland, Baltimore, it's almost like if either of these teams could get healthy, they could really go on a run. It's just kind of a race against the clock to see if anybody can do it.
Yeah, I wouldn't count Cleveland out yet either. I think Cleveland wins this game. They're 5-4, and I think they're back on track. This is a huge game for Cleveland. I think that's also kind of why I like Cleveland here, and that's kind of a dumb, a dumb football guy thing to think there. But it does feel like since he can lose this game and absolutely still make the playoffs, and since he can lose this game and bounce back, and I don't think that a loss to the Browns for them would really be a terrible loss. The Browns dipping to 4-5, that's tough. That would be a tough loss for the Browns at this point.
All right. Moving on to Denver. Moving on to Dallas, I should say. Denver travels to Dallas to take on the Cowboys. Dak, as far as I know, will be back for this one. I think it was an abundance of caution thing last week, although I will say, if there's any little residual thing about his calf, maybe this is a game you at least let him sit out that first half and see if you can get a lead over a Denver team that sells off Von Miller at the trade deadline. They've only put up 17 points against Washington. They've been under 20 in 4 of their last 5 games. Denver is a team that's kind of falling apart. I don't think they can win this game no matter who's at quarterback. But as far as I know, Dak is playing. What's your take on this one?
Dak's playing. He probably shouldn't be. I think that, especially with the win last week, and you look at the landscape of the NFC East, there's no reason that he should be playing. They should have benched him for this game. They probably could have benched him for that Atlanta game. And they probably still would have won one of those games. Cooper Rush probably could have won a game against Denver or a game against Atlanta at home. They probably go 1-1 there. And then maybe you bring him back against Kansas City, and then he plays at Thanksgiving. Like, I think that would have been a more reasonable thing to do. But Jerry Jones he didn't even really mess around about it. He just came out and said, yeah, Dak's playing. Like, it's the medical staff I heard was not very happy with that. But Jerry Jones is your owner. You play under a little bit different rules. There's not much to say here. I think Denver stinks. Denver had one of the most under the radar wins of all time last week. I feel like I listened to all these NFL podcasts. I feel like no one had any coverage of this Washington Denver game. I'm not even necessarily sure it happened.
Yeah. So we've got comments coming in here. Dallas, but I hope the Broncos pull the upset. Yeah, I think we're all there. Said
This is
CeeDee
true.
Lamb's also limited with an ankle, so he and Dak. What's the story on the ankle injury? Were you about to touch on that, or?
No, I was just gonna say it seems like I think he's been a non-participant a couple times in a row now this week at practice, so that's definitely got to be a concern. I kind of didn't realize that until today. Earlier on, I didn't realize he was even hurt. I have him on a fantasy team. I started looking into it and going through the Twitter sleuth and the injuries, and I was like, oh man. But even without CD, I think Gallup is actually potentially coming back this week. So even without CD, they still have an excellent. They just as like when they drafted CD, we were joking about how much of an embarrassment of riches it was at the time because of how good Cooper and Gallup already were. So, I mean, I think that they'll be fine without him. They also have two pretty solid tight ends and two pretty solid running backs. Dallas is really good. Dallas should win this game pretty easily.
Yeah. Okay, Houston Texans traveling to Miami in a game that has huge draft pick implication for the Eagles. Both teams won week one, haven't won since. Miami officially doesn't trade for Deshaun Watson. If they had, this could have potentially been a Deshaun Watson revenge game, I guess. Also, Odell goes unclaimed, so he goes on to waivers now. The Lions are number one, but the Dolphins are number two. And to be honest, I can't imagine the Dolphins not putting in a claim on him, assuming the Lions don't. This is a team that clearly doesn't care about locker room issues because they were all these rumors about trading for Deshaun Watson. So I can't imagine that he doesn't end up in Miami unless Detroit claims him, although I'm not sure exactly how quick that process works. I doubt we would see him play on Sunday, but could be a bad thing if he goes in there and starts lighting it up in terms of the Eagles draft capital. But I'll take Miami in this one. I think Houston stinks. They're awful. I don't think they'll win another game this year.
I hear you. I'm going with a homer pick here, though. And it's really, I don't know who wins the game. I have Texans plus 7.5 from earlier on this week. It's at 5.5 now. I took it at 7.5, hoping Tyrod would be announced in. Tyrod is playing on Sunday, which is a good sign for this Eagles pick. And I know Shane might have picked the Texans or picked the Dolphins there, but I know he'll be rooting for the Texans with me. Texans win that game. That pick starts to get really, really interesting, that Dolphins pick. So this is a big game for Tua in general. Tua has had some improvements the last couple weeks. And it's so funny that like 3 weeks ago, I was like, I'm done. I'm out on Tua. He started like putting up numbers and started looking a little better. But it hasn't really resulted in wins for Miami. And it also, like you said, this would have been the Deshaun Watson Bowl. This is still I don't think that the Dolphins are out of the Deshaun Watson race in the offseason. So Tua could 100% be a Texan by the time February rolls around, March rolls around. So this might be a little bit of a tryout game for Tua for the Houston Texans. Maybe Tua comes in and tanks it so that the Texans don't want to trade for him. I don't know.
That's possible.
I'll take the Texans to win, though.
Just play awful so you don't end up in Houston. Yeah. It's not a bad plan. Okay, the Atlanta Falcons go to the New Orleans Saints. Atlanta looked like they were picking up steam, but then they dropped a game to Carolina. Calvin Ridley is out for a while with mental health absence. And Kyle Pitts, I touched on this on the review show, had a rough game without him because there's not a lot else on that team. You blanket that tight end, they're bracketing him. I can't imagine New Orleans won't do the same thing. New Orleans is coming off of a victory over the Bucs, and I initially thought Trevor Siemian's going to get the start. Now maybe it's going to be Hill.
They announced it was Siemian today.
Oh, okay. I had missed that. I knew Hill was supposed to be coming back, so I was going to say I can't imagine going from Siemian after they beat the Bucs. But what do you make of this one?
So I saw they announced Siemian in. I don't know if that means Taysom Hill's out, or if that means Siemian's starting and that Taysom Hill will be involved. I don't have any clarity there. But I think Taysom Hill should be the guy, probably. I know Siemian beat the Bucs. I know Siemian had his moment last week. I wasn't like overly impressed when I watched the game, and I'm not to complain because I had money on the Bucs or anything. But I did think the officiating in that game was pretty terrible. It seemed like every single time that the Bucs defense did anything, they were calling a PI or whatever that flag was for New Orleans. So I don't think that Siemian was quite as good as a lot of people seem to be saying this week. And I think that they showed last year. I'm not a Taysom Hill guy. Let me just preface this by saying that I don't think he's a starting quarterback. But if there's anyone in the league I would trust to be able to form an offense around that, it would be Sean Payton. And he kind of showed that he could last year. I know we beat them with Taysom Hill, but I think that they won like 2 or 3 in a row before that game, going into that Eagles game with Taysom as the starting quarterback before Drew Brees came back from an injury. And that shocked me at the time. And with how good the Saints defense is playing, and that was the story of last week's game more than anything to me, how good of a job they did against the Bucs offense instead of how good Trevor Siemian did against the Bucs defense. So I would say that with the way that this Saints defense is playing, I think that you could get away with running the type of offense that Taysom Hill would force you to run.
Yeah, it's incredible what he has been able to do, what Sean Payton's been able to do with backup quarterbacks. We talk about Sean McVay as the QB whisperer and what he did with Jared Goff and all these things, but who's the better coach for quarterbacks? Is it Sean Payton or is it Sean McVay?
I won't only say that Sean Payton's a better coach for quarterbacks. I would take Sean Payton over any coach in the NFL in general, just as a whole. I think Sean Payton's the best coach in the league. I think Bill Belichick's the best coach of all time. But if we're just saying where we're standing right now, I think Sean Payton's the better coach right now. So I'll go with the Saints to win here. It's a really big spread, isn't it? This is like a Saints by 6, Saints by something like that, 7. It's a bigger spread than you'd think. I would not touch the Saints spread with a 10-foot pole, but I think that they probably do win. I was shocked Atlanta didn't win that game last week.
Yeah, Julio says he's not touching the game. Don't know about the Saints backup yet. Same. I wouldn't touch this game in a gambling perspective, but I do have New Orleans to win because I'm with you. I think Sean Payton's the best coach in the NFL right now. What
he's doing is incredible. I think he should be the coach of the year right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And this has all been without Michael Thomas too.
Yeah, they've gotten nothing skill position wise on offense besides Alvin Kamara.
All right, the Raiders travel to the Meadowlands to take on the Giants. They have, of course, the whole thing with Henry Ruggs goes down. He is no longer on the team. They cut him, which non-football aside, man, one decision totally changes your life, and not just his. I mean, the family of the lady that he killed is a very unfortunate thing, but guys, that's a serious deal. Don't drink and get behind the wheel of a car ever. But even beyond that, just one decision can just radically alter the course of your life. So you guys be smart out there, stay safe. But you have to wonder, have the Raiders reached a breaking point? I mean, you have the Gruden thing a couple of weeks ago. Now you have Ruggs. This is a team that's been through the emotional ringer. How do you think they respond in this one?
It's hard to tell. Also, before I don't, since it involves the Giants, this game is a Giants game too. It feels relevant to say that I was a fan of Kadarius Toney coming into the draft, and I was following his career. I think he's a very good player. I don't know if you happen to see it.
Yeah, I saw the tweet.
The tweet he sent is the worst tweet in the history of Twitter. So I completely changed my opinion of not only Henry Ruggs but someone else involved in the the social media aspect of it. And yeah, it's horrible. The whole thing is horrible. Henry Ruggs, I mean, he's a murderer, literally. Like it's terrible. Whatever. I don't want to get too far into it, but taking away the awfulness and the non-football factor aside, it is a huge loss on the football field for the Las Vegas Raiders. And I know that seems so inconsequential to even talk about when it's a situation like this, to talk about the football impact. They were weak at receiver with Henry Ruggs. They were weak at receiver with the breakout that Henry Ruggs was having. And they're obviously much weaker now. Obviously, they have Darren Waller. I know that they brought in John Brown to be the number 2 receiver this offseason. He didn't make it through training camp. They cut him. So they've been weak at receiver all year. And I expect that to be a problem continuing. I would say the Raiders win the game. I'm not going to bet this game because, who can tell how the Raiders are going to respond. I will say that the Raiders did respond quite well when John Gruden, obviously that issue took place and they beat our ass. They beat the Eagles. So I kind of think that this might be one of those situations where, I mean, Derek Carr has done a fantastic job, I think, at kind of talking to the media and speaking his way through this situation as the leader of the team. And maybe that's something that the team can get behind, and maybe that's something that the team can rally behind. I sure hope so, because I don't want the Giants to win.
Yeah, I did bet this game. I bet it before all of that happened. I took the Raiders -2.5. But you also now you have the Giants. They come off short rest on Monday Night Football, and now I believe Saquon and Xavier McKinley are out with COVID. So several unknown factors before I made that bet. I still like it, I think, but I am a little apprehensive now just knowing what state the Raiders are going to be in. But I'll take the Raiders in this one. I think they get it done.
I agree.
Okay, New England at Carolina, another game I bet. New England -3.5. No clue why that line is so small. New England has back-to-back wins, including upsetting the Chargers, which is something we called and bet on this podcast a week ago. I think both of us had money on that game and on some unders that paid out. Sam Darnold is in concussion protocol, so it could be PJ Walker. Not sure if that's a good thing or not, to be honest. But so not sure who's going to play quarterback, which even adds more. I just don't get this line. But the New England defense is allowing the third lowest completion rate in the NFL right now. And their defense is just obnoxious. Like, they switched from a man-heavy scheme to a zone-heavy scheme now that Gilmore's gone. They rotate between quarters, cover 2, cover 3, inverts. They roll coverages. They do things that nobody else can do. And, we talked about the best coach. Bill Belichick's the best defensive coach in the league. The things that he's able to do with that defense are just incredible. What do you see playing out in this one?
I also have the Patriots. I got them at -3 earlier on in the week, so I got that hook. But obviously, the bigger factor for me here is less about Sam Darnold, which I actually didn't even know about. You broke that news to me. I didn't know Sam Darnold was in concussion protocol, but Christian McCaffrey is the bigger injury issue here. If he plays, the Panthers are a different team. If he doesn't, they aren't. Maybe that's Vegas kind of hedging against maybe the Christian McCaffrey news. Maybe they think he's playing. I still like New England to win this game and to win it by a touchdown or more. Mac Jones has been playing fantastic the last couple of weeks, so you have to imagine that'll continue. I think that maybe they might not have like a number 1 weapon or maybe not even a number 2 weapon, but they have like a ton of options. When you look at just across the field, they got Jacoby Myers, Nelson Aguilar. They have Kendrick Bourne, who I've always been a fan of. They have 2 tight ends who are finally starting to kind of get involved. So Davian Harris is really stepping up running the football. And that's someone that I've always thought had the ability to be one of those top flight running backs, but kind of gets slept on because he's not a dual threat back. He's really kind of a throwback to the 90s style running back. So I think the Patriots run the ball at will here on Carolina. I think that they're able to win this game. And even if it's ugly, I think they still cover -3, -3.5.
Yeah, Job asked on YouTube, is Christian McCaffrey going to be back? I know he's been designated to return from IR. Mm-hmm. No idea if that means he's going to play or not. I would imagine he's not going to play, but that's just speculation. I don't have any information on that.
They've been very weird with his, they've been very protective of the injury.
Okay, Buffalo at Jacksonville. The Bills found a way to win behind a really good defensive performance against Miami. Not the best offensive performance. The same week that the Jags found a way to give up 31 points to Geno Smith. So
14 like that.
Yeah. And he completed, I think it was his first 14 passes. This is Geno Smith, you guys. So, I mean, this isn't even a game worth watching. I am interested in this game in the Jags under 16.5 points, but I have not quite pulled the trigger. I was going to float that one out there to you. What do you think about Jags under 16.5?
I haven't looked into the numbers yet. I'd have to look at how much Jacksonville scored per week, how much Buffalo's given up per week. But just doing like a cursory glance here, Buffalo's given up 11, 31, 20, 0, 21. I mean, yeah, the Jags offense is not very good. It's close. It's not something I would bet on, I think, but I see the logic behind it. Yeah, I don't have much to add here. Buffalo should rout. Buffalo. The thing I'd be concerned about is that this is a 42 to 10 game, and it's like Jacksonville's just driving against their backups. Similar, it ended up cashing for us, but that Patriots Jets game where we both had the Jets team total under, that was my big bet that week, and it was like the Patriots just kept scoring, so I thought the Jets were just going to score against their backups at the end for the fun of it. So I'm always concerned taking lines that low. This is a completely kind of side topic, Georgia in college football has an unbelievable defense. If anyone out there is a college football fan, they're the number one team in the country. They play Missouri this weekend. Missouri's team total is 10.5. I actually like it a lot. I like the under, but instead I'm just going to take under 60 and just hope Georgia doesn't hang a 50. It's kind of similar, like to how I would look at that Buffalo Jacksonville thing.
Yeah. All right, let's keep moving. Minnesota at Baltimore. Baltimore is coming off of a loss to Cincinnati and then a bye week. They were on a roll prior to the Bengals loss. Then obviously they got the bye week to stew on that. Baltimore is averaging the 4th most rushing yards per attempt. Minnesota is allowing the 6th most rushing yards per attempt. And, I mean, Minnesota just lost to Cooper Rush last week. So their offense can be dangerous when it's hot. I just don't see how they stop the Lions. I don't see how they stop the Ravens. So even if their offense turns in a good performance, I just don't see how they can slow down that Ravens rushing attack. I like the Ravens in this one.
Couple things real quick. Breaking news. Not that this is a huge deal. Dolphins placed Devontae Parker on injured reserve after suffering a setback with his hamstring. He's now out 3 games minimum. Maybe that Odell theory you had about Miami is going to come true. But the thing you slept on there in that Ravens Vikings thing, and this is the most important part of the matchup. It's the Purple Bowl. They both wear purple. It's gonna be tough to tell who's who out there. I don't know. That's gonna be tough. It's a stupid joke, but the Ravens. I think the Ravens should win the game. I think they're the much better team. And there's also I think the center for the Vikings has COVID. So I hope Kirk Cousins has built a plexiglass.
A plexiglass, yeah.
Yeah, I hope
keep himself safe. You got your buddy Joe chiming in on YouTube, says, Shane's on an HD camera today. I did. I upgraded my camera. So he said Vikings lost to a backup. Let's be real. Give me the Ravens -6. And I think, yeah, we probably – I'm not betting on this one personally because I think it could turn into a shootout, but I definitely like the Ravens to win.
I don't think you people want to see me in HD cam, so I'm gonna stick with my bad camera here.
All right. Well, speaking of COVID, and we'll not derail onto this because we got to keep moving, but the Green Bay Packers are traveling to Kansas City to play the Chiefs. Aaron Rodgers is out with COVID. Jordan Love has played 18 career snaps since being a first-round pick. I do think it's worth noting that with all of the disputes with Rodgers in the front office, Matt LaFleur was willing to go with Jordan Love as his guy this year before Rodgers came back. Kansas City is a good defense. If you can't play the Eagles, you might as well play the Chiefs to get your first reps as a starting quarterback, really. How do you think Jordan Love fares in this game? And what do you see happening here?
Who knows? It's one of those games where it's so unknown. This is an unknown variable. I would not touch this game from a gambling perspective, but it kind of depends on what your draft evaluation of Jordan Love was. And mine was kind of right in the middle. I saw the upside, but I also saw the detractors. I probably would have had him as a 2nd-round pick. He went in the back end of the first. I guess, what was your evaluation on Love? How much did you like him coming into the draft?
I don't really remember. I'd have to go back and look at my stuff. I remember not liking the pick for the Packers at the time, but I think that was more to do with just the fact that it's literally the only first-round pick they've spent on an offensive player in years, and it was a replacement for Aaron Rodgers. I can't honestly remember. I'll go back and look and see if I can dig that up before our next show.
It's going to be fun.
Or our review show.
Yeah, it's a fun nugget, though. It's a fun thing to watch for that we're getting a look at. It's almost like a rookie quarterback coming in. It'll be a fun watch. That'll be a game I'm definitely keeping tabs on for sure. But just a quick aside, and I'm not going to get too embroiled here. Just going back to the offseason, when Aaron Rodgers wanted out of Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers was doing that whole song and dance, I think I went on a long diatribe about it here with Rodgers and Russell Wilson both. And the reasons that those players wanted to leave their teams, they can go on and on about the GM and all the moves that they disagreed with. Rodgers can give his diatribe about them cutting Jake Kumaro, and he can talk about all that all he wants. The reason that Russ wanted to leave Seattle and the reason that Aaron Rodgers wanted to leave Green Bay are the same. Shailene Woodley didn't want to live in Wisconsin, and Ciara didn't want to live in Seattle. And I think that you can see with a lot of the personal decisions that Rodgers is making and a lot of the statements that Rodgers is making, and then you look into some of the things that Shailene Woodley has said in interviews about making her own medicines and stuff like that. I think you can make a direct correlation to Shailene Woodley having a direct impact on all of Aaron Rodgers' decisions. And we've seen that in the past because Olivia Munn got Aaron Rodgers to stop talking to his family. So this is a football show. I'm not going to go too in depth at it. I'm not going to get into the COVID of it all, but I will just say that anyone who out there who was empathizing with Rodgers all offseason while he had a top 2 receiver in Devontae Adams and a top 5 running back in Aaron Jones and 3 highly paid offensive linemen and a bunch of a bunch of very good players on defense. They spent a ton of money on Zadarius Smith and some other guys on the defense. So I think that all of that empathy for Aaron Rodgers and the situation he was in, I don't think that he was necessarily wanting out of Green Bay because they cut Jake Kumaro. That's all I'll say on the matter. Kansas City should win.
If we really want to test your theory, I guess we could just find out what she thinks about Randall Cobb, because Aaron Rodgers is definitely devoted to forcing the ball to Randall Cobb in the red zone. So we just have to find out what she thinks. But yeah, the Chiefs, they have to win this game if they want to make the playoffs. And to be honest, I'm not sure they do. I'm going to pick them because I think the biggest issue with Patrick Mahomes right now is feeling like he has to do it all, and I don't think he will feel that against Jordan Love like he would against Aaron Rodgers. So I think he settles down. I think you see a better game. But this is a game Kansas City's got to win if they want to make a playoff push.
Clyde's coming back, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I'm pretty sure he's a very good pass blocking back. That'll help out a little bit as well. And also he can catch the ball a little bit, and obviously he'll help in the running game. And the running game has gotten going in the last week. It got going a little bit, and then they went away from it. I would say that the running game here is the X factor for the Chiefs.
Yeah. All right, moving on. We got 3 games left. Arizona at San Francisco. Arizona is coming off a heartbreaking loss Thursday night to Green Bay, a wild game. I covered it in the recap show, but you guys got to go watch the highlights for that if you missed it. The highlights of the game, not the highlights of me. There's no highlights of me. 49ers put up 33 points on the Bears last week. They ran for 145 yards and 3 touchdowns, but the Cardinals have a really good front 7. What do you make of this game?
It all depends on Kyler, right? It all depends on whether Kyler's playing or not. That's the whole question mark. I love Arizona if Kyler plays, even if he's hobbled, even no matter what. Justin Fields really made San Fran's defense look suspect last week. That was Fields' first huge game, and I'm sure you loved watching that Fields game. I'm sure you loved it. Really seemed like he turned a corner there. It seemed like he and I'm sure we'll talk about that when it comes to the Pittsburgh game, and hopefully Matt Nagy's locked out of the building. But I think that the 49ers defense was exposed last week, and I don't know if Kyler's healthy enough to run around in the way that Fields was, but I still think that Kyler will give that defense a ton of problems, whether that be through the ground or through the air. And I think Arizona's just a way better team than San Fran at this point. I know Jimmy G kind of had his moment last week where maybe he might have saved his job or whatever you want to say. I think there's going to be a big letdown spot for San Fran after a big win last week.
So he was absent he was absent today from the open portion of the Cardinals practice, and one of the Cardinals beat reporters he doesn't expect Murray to play. But Cliff Kingsbury is still saying they're hopeful. So I took the Cardinals in this game in a pick 'em. The last time I bet on a team that had an ambiguous starting quarterback situation, it worked out well. So we're just going to try to ride that wave and hope he plays.
Yeah, I'm staying away until Sunday, but you might be getting a great value if Kyler ends up playing.
I took it in a pick 'em earlier in the week when it looked a little more likely he'd play. I would still take it in a pick 'em right now, just on the off chance, but it's definitely a little more risky than I thought it was at the time.
Let's say they rule Kyler out today, like for instance, or tomorrow. What do you think that line jumps to for San Fran?
Ooh.
I think it goes under a field goal. I think it'd be like 2.5.
Yeah, I was going to say like 3.5, 4.
Yeah.
Okay. Tennessee Titans at the Los Angeles Rams. So the Titans have lost Derrick Henry, which is a massive blow to their offense. The EPA per play since 2019 for Derrick Henry versus backups on the field. So when Henry's on the field versus when McNichols or any other backup is on the field, it goes from a negative EPA per play to positive on runs. The EPA is doubled on passes. And so we have the analytics thing, running backs don't matter. And that's true unless their name's Derrick Henry. Like losing him, the EPA impact of losing Derrick Henry is like losing a quarterback for most teams. And so you also look at the fact that the Rams just got Von Miller. This is a very difficult spot for Ryan Tannehill. I think the Titans are really going to struggle. They're going to have to change their identity. You can't be the running team that you were. I said that they should have gone and made a wide receiver move at the trade deadline because they want to compete. you can't bring in Adrian Peterson and expect him to make a difference. They should have made a move for a wide receiver and just commit to spreading it out a little bit more. But what do you think? What do you see with this game?
I think they should have looked into a move for Zach Ertz. I think that would have been an interesting piece for this Titans team. But I think that they're going to have to change their identity, and I guess it's a good thing they have Julio Jones there now. Julio has not been himself, obviously, so far this year, and he's been so banged up. But if they can get Julio right, and A.J. Brown's been playing out of his mind finally after kind of starting the season really slow. He's kind of looking like himself again. And looking like himself means looking like a young Randy Moss. That guy's just so talented, A.J. Brown, and Ryan Tannehill's a lucky quarterback to have that at his disposal. Not quite as lucky when you don't have Derrick Henry. But I do think Tennessee will be able to change their identity. Not this week. I think the Rams win this game. I think the Rams win the Super Bowl. So I think the Rams are the best team in football. But I don't think the Titans will get embarrassed here. I don't think this will be a blowout. I think the Rams will win. They might win handily. I don't think it'll be an embarrassing game for Tennessee. And I think Tennessee in the next couple of weeks will be able to step up on defense. And obviously we'll have to step up on offense, whether that be Adrian Peterson getting early down work or whether that be Jeremy McNichols, who's gotten passing down work before when Derrick Henry's been healthy. I would say that hopefully they use McNichols more than Adrian Peterson because I think we know what we have in Adrian Peterson. So I think that if McNichols can step up into being a good passing down back, that gives you another option in the passing game. And it's a good thing you have Julio and A.J. Brown there to play off of each other. So I think they will still win this division. I don't know if you agree with that. I know the Colts just got a win last night, but the Titans still have that tiebreaker over them. And I think the Colts are now 4-5, and the Titans are, I think they're 5-2, so they'll probably be 5-3 after this week. Still a pretty big lead considering they have the tiebreaker. What do you think about that?
I think they still win the division. Unless they just fall apart. But that lead that they have with the head-to-head, I mean, they're essentially up they're up 3 games basically over the Colts if they were to lose this week, which I expect them to. But they'd still be up 3 with 7 games to go. I mean, the Colts are going to have to win go 6-1 over the rest of the season, and the Titans go like 3-4 for them to be able to make that up.
Without looking at the schedule, I imagine the Titans have some games against the Texans and the Jaguars remaining. Right. The next 2 games after this week are home for the Texans and home for the Jaguars. So I think that maybe now that I'm looking at that schedule, I can see them getting blown out. Maybe they get blown out, and then that bounce back is Houston and Jacksonville, and they find out who they are while kind of playing against those crap teams.
Yeah, I think mathematically it's pretty unlikely the Colts win the division, but I think a playoff berth's still in order for them.
It could happen for sure.
So Julio is heading out, and he says Philly by 17, Eagles go Birds. So big advantage for the Eagles in his mind in this week's game. So let's wrap it up here with the Chicago Bears at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers have won 3 straight. They're trying to fight back into a playoff picture and ruin a preseason team win total bet I had on them. Meanwhile, Chicago has lost 3 straight, but Justin Fields did take some steps, notably with Matt Nagy gone. This isn't a good matchup for Justin Fields, though. He's going against a dominant defense. Matt Nagy's still his coach again, so that's also working against him. Personally, I took the Steelers under 23.5, and I took Chicago under 16.5 in this game. The Steelers have only been over 23 points once all year. Chicago has fluctuated, but they're playing such a good defense and that Matt Nagy factor. I just can't see the Bears getting much rolling here. So I'll take the Steelers for the win. I'm anticipating this being a low-scoring game.
If you think it's a low-scoring game, you should like my bet, which is Bears +7. I got it earlier on in the week. It's at 6.5 now. This is actually probably my bet of the week in the NFL. I should have the number right here, but of course I don't. But Mike Tomlin has been an absolutely terrible favorite in the NFL, especially by over a field goal. So I think that the Bears, I really do think Justin Fields turned the corner last week. It might not be a great matchup this week, but I think he gained a ton of confidence. So I'm hoping that that's something he takes into a big stage here, obviously. When Mike Tomlin is favored by more than a field goal, he is 54-69-1 against the spread, and they failed to cover the last 5 in that spot. So I think that this is a terrible spot for the Steelers gambling wise. They might win, but it'll be low scoring, like you said, which I always love to take a 7-point dog in a low scoring game.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this week's slate. Mark, do you have any final thoughts for us?
Yeah, everyone, I mean, you're going to plug my Twitter in a second, but everyone go follow at Mark Henry Jr. _ I sent out a tweet today. I did some math. I'm up 207 units since September 2nd. It's the best gambling run of my lifetime, and I've had some pretty good streaks. So I have some picks tonight. My best bet over 52.5 Utah Stanford's at 10:30. It's a college football play. If you're watching live, go and play that. So yeah, everyone go check out my my Twitter and my Action Network, which is linked in my bio.
Yeah, my final thought was going to be being really excited for the new Call of Duty game that just dropped today and wanting to play it a bunch tonight. But then I went over to Twitter and this popped up, and I remember this moment. But do you remember Peyton Manning in Denver calling his own number at the goal line against the Cowboys? I'll never forget watching this. Like, the camera doesn't even follow Manning, and then all of a sudden it moves over and he's like jogging into the end zone. I'll never forget after the game they asked him about that, and he said it was supposed to be a handoff, and he just didn't hand it off. So like he didn't even change the play. Like his running back is expecting the ball and he just kept it. Like you can even see his running back just kind of like stutter for a second when Manning doesn't hand him the ball. They don't make quarterbacks like that anymore. Just such a incredibly, I mean, he can do whatever he wants. He was established at that point in time, but I can't even imagine like being a quarterback and the play being a handoff and being as unathletic as Peyton Manning and being like, you know what? I'm keeping this one. It was his first rushing touchdown, and I think it was 6 years at the time. So just hilarious play. It just popped up on my Twitter timeline when I was checking when I was looking for my other tweet earlier. So like, I'm going to save that and talk about it. So that's it. That's all I got.
I love Peyton. How mad he gets it when quarterbacks make bad plays. Like when Daniel Jones stared down the receiver, he's like, "Can't do that, Eli. Can't do that, Eli." It's so funny. I love Peyton.
Yeah, just ESPN, just put him on the regular broadcast.
Yeah.
Just put him and Eli up there. No guests, just those two guys. I'd watch every single game. All right. Job is going to take us out of here with a Fly, Eagles, Fly. So thank you guys for joining us for episode 22 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, be sure and smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us out. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at @halfandhalf_TPL. He's at Mark Henry Jr. For me, from Mark, from the Painted Lines, we'll see you guys next time.